In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. The topic of ego is very important topic, but as much as I know, we don't have something in Islamic culture which directly can be used as equivalent to ego. We don't use this type of expression, ego. What we have is nafs, which means sometimes soul, sometimes means self. But then there's a whole range of concepts and ideas about self. Sometimes you have to honor yourself. Sometimes you have to fight yourself. So I cannot say self means ego, because ego is always bad. So this is I don't know actually about, for example, the early Christian texts. They have something like ego, or maybe early Christians didn't have ego.
The word ego is not used in scripture.
Yeah, it seems not in our culture. Also seems not to be. Yeah, exactly. So what I like to do is to refer to few hadith sayings of the Prophet and Imams, and here you see how they warn us about self. And then I would try to say what is my understanding of this. I will mention that. For example, we have this hadith, very famous hadith, that the Prophet once sent a group for a battle. Some of the battles he himself was there. Sometimes he was staying in the town and sending a group to, for example, keep pagans away or whatever. There was a group who were sent by the Prophet, and when they were going back to the city, to Medina, after they had won the battle, the Prophet met them and said, "Well done, and welcome to the people who have completed the minor struggle. And now upon them is the major struggle, jihad." So he said they have done jihad asghar, and now they have to do jihad akbar, greater struggle. And they were shocked. What can be greater than this jihad? Because we were going to lose our maybe life or health forever, and we have won. So why what is this? Is there a greater enemy going to attack? And the Prophet said, greater struggle is to fight against your own self, which we can say today, ego, for example. That's it, self. In another hadith, we have that the Prophet said, the best jihad, the best struggle, is to fight yourself to keep it away from whims. Whims. Yeah? Whims. And to keep it away from worldly pleasure. This is greater struggle, not militant struggle. In some hadiths, we have that your most hostile enemy is yourself, which is inside you. It's your most hostile enemy. Our first Imam said, fight yourself for obedience to God. The same way that an enemy fights his enemy. So it's a severe fight and battle, but you have to fight your own self to make yourself obedient. And try to win over yourself as an enemy tries to win his enemy. The strongest people are those who are strong against their own selves or ego. So we have many things like this. Even a few years ago, a book is published by Islamic College, which is translation of the sayings about this idea, combat with the self. There's a whole book about this. So it's very important concept, not just one hadith or two hadiths. But also we have many things in the Quran and hadith about the significance of a person having care of himself or herself, knowing himself or herself, honoring yourself. For example, the hadith says that if someone doesn't have honor for himself or herself, don't feel safe. Or if someone's self is honorable, it would be easy for him or her to resist temptations. So we have two sets of, texts. On the one hand, be very careful, very much alarmed, warned about yourself. On the other hand, there is something very precious here, something godly in us that God has blown from His Spirit to us, and we should know it, we should look after it, we should honor it. So there are two things like that. Also in the Quran, and then reflected in Islamic literature, we find there are three types of soul or self. Nafs ammara, the nafs, the soul or soul, which is commanding to do bad things. And then lawwama, the one that blames you when you do bad things. So at one stage, keeps telling you do this thing to just enjoy yourself. But higher is blaming you if you do bad things. And higher is nafs mutma'inna, which is tranquil and confident. So they said there are three stages. We have also lots of discussions in Islamic philosophy about human self. So, Muslim scholars have dealt with this issue a lot. And one of our contemporary scholars, Ayatollah Mutahari, he says that we have two selves inside us. One is, he calls it lower self, one is higher self. The lower self is more like animal self and is more concerned about worldly pleasure and comfort and, not being responsible, not committing to anything, just wants to be free and enjoy. But we have a higher self, which is godly self, which is only for human beings. Animals don't have that, Animals operate at the level of animals, and they are not blamed for that. But because we have two levels, if we act like animals, we are blamed. And so we have that higher or godly self. Unfortunately, many times, the lower self is running us. So the control is given to the lower self. And the higher self is imprisoned. It's like, we have a prophet who is in prison. And For example, Pharaoh is ruling. So he says every emphasis on knowing and taking care and honoring self is about the higher self. Everything about fighting yourself, or even some Sufis and some mystics, they say you must kill yourself. They don't say just fight yourself. They say kill yourself. You might have this also concept. So you must kill yourself. Even there were some people, of course we don't like that, but there were some Sufis called Malamati. These are people that they used to do everything to make people develop negative image of them. For example, they were not drinking wine, but they were going to places of selling wine and coming out and doing like this, so that people say this person is not a religious person and he's not a practicing Muslim. But they were practicing, but they pretended that they are bad because they thought this is the only way to get rid of your ego. Mm-hmm. There is one of them that he says there were few occasions in my life that I was very, very happy. One occasion was that because sometimes they didn't look after their dress, they didn't look after their beard, or they wanted to look terrible, but deliberately, not because they were lazy. They wanted to look terrible so that people look at them negatively, and they thought this is the way to get rid of your ego. So one of them says that I was 3 times very happy in my life. One was that I had a woolen dress, and when I looked, I could not see there are more pieces of hair, of wool, or more insects in my dress. Such a disgusting thing, but he says I was very happy to see this because it means my ego is disappearing. Or for example, he says, we were on a ship or boat, and they wanted to reduce the weight, and they wanted, to get rid of some people. And when they looked at people, they picked me up because I was the least significant person. He says, I felt very happy. So these are some people, we don't like this, we don't approve this. But the idea is that you have to fight against your ego. But of course, we say you have to do it wisely and morally, which is more difficult actually. If you totally isolate yourself from people and you don't want to do anything in the society, it's easier than being respected in the society but remaining humble and fighting against your ego. It's more difficult and more challenging. So, the lower self should be resisted, should be controlled, as you said. The Quran talks about prohibiting the soul. أَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. You have to prohibit your soul to go after her desires. But also the Quran talks about the concept of purifying your soul. You have to purify it. Some people say it's like a wild horse that wants to run away, and you have to tame it. When you tame it, it becomes very useful. But when it is wild, doesn't listen to you, wants to take you with herself. Yeah. So it's like taming a wild animal. So either we say animal soul, human soul, lower self, I don't know, higher self, things like this. Or something that I think can also help, and I have been saying this in also interfaith context, is to say that we have a reality. We have a mixed or combined reality. We have different aspects. We have something similar with non-living beings. We have something similar with the plants. We have something similar with animals, but we have something also more. So every human being is a multi-floor being. Yeah? This is not a problem. The problem is whether you accept that there is something transcendent and higher that you have to adapt yourself to it, or you don't want to acknowledge that and you want to do what you like, or if you are more arrogant, you say, I am the center of the world, and you have to adapt yourself to it. So first, I rebel against God. I rebel against virtues, values. I deny rights of people. But then it goes further, and I become so arrogant that I say, I decide who has right, what is virtuous, what is vicious. You have to listen to me. Maybe we don't say it consciously, but people do this, For example, many times in family, a husband can have this, or wife can have this, a mother or father or child or a neighbor, a manager, sometimes an employee. It's not necessarily a matter of having more money. If you have more money, it's maybe making it worse, or more power, but sometimes even people have no money and power, but ego can be there. Actually, sometimes people who lack, they become more vulnerable, because if someone is strong inside, doesn't claim that much from outside, like a manager or a teacher. When you are a very established, experienced teacher, if a student asks questions, you are not feeling challenged or offended. Yeah, indeed, you like students to ask more questions. But if you are not an experienced teacher, every person who asks questions, you feel bad, and you think he wants to, maybe undermine you, and you want to also attack them. The same is a ruler or government. When a ruler or government feels very confident, they give freedom to people. But if they feel they are in danger, they become dictators. So, it's not necessarily a matter of poverty or rich, power or having no power. Even people who are poor can become very arrogant. But sometimes, you can say, or most of the time, having more means can make you more vulnerable to arrogance. So, if that self becomes central, I don't know if we can say in English central, I don't want to say centralized. I want to say to become center, like egocentric, yeah? So if that self becomes for me the center of everything, I think that is ego. And that is what maybe scholars say it's nafs ammare, or that's what you can say is ego, whatever. And the problem is that this is taking different colors. Every day is changing its dress so that you cannot recognize. It can be demanding money, demanding power, demanding praise, but even it can be sometimes religious, demanding to be more practicing, demanding to build more mosques or churches or higher mosques than the other people's mosque, or our gathering, our congregation should be bigger than that. It can take many different forms. You cannot really say I understood every way that Ego is playing with us. There is no end to this. And it becomes very dangerous if ego, instead of saying that I am demanding this, says God is demanding this. So sometimes I deny God and I say, you have to listen to me. It's dangerous, but more dangerous, say, listen to God. But I tell you what God says. So then here I have advantage of expressing my wishes without being responsible for that. And without anyone criticizing me. I say, I'm just asking you to sacrifice for God. And sometimes people, even they themselves, don't understand this. They think they are doing a service, but in reality, they're not doing a service. And sometimes these people, because they have this misconception that they are doing this out of a service or for God, they allow themselves to do things that people who have no backup of religion would dare doing. I'm not saying all the wars or most of the wars are caused by religious people, but I think we can agree that sometimes religious people have done terrible things. And if they were not religious, maybe they would not have done it, or they would not have dared it, or maybe other people would not have helped them. You can say it is a holy war, for example, then mobilize Sunnis against Shia, or Shias against Sunni, or Muslims against Christian, or Christian. But if you just say, we are few, for example, people from this country, we want to fight another country. Or from this city, we want to fight people. People may not buy it. But if you give it a religious flavor or color, they can buy it and they can support it. So, ego, which is centralized human self, which wants to define what is right, what is wrong, what is even true or what is false, because they go even further. Not only first they question what is right and wrong in the way we understand, but sometimes also they say this is true, this is false. They say something false and they say this is alternative fact. you have to accept it. Yeah? So, this can go further and further, and a person puts himself in the position of God and demands people full obedience. The Quran says Pharaoh said two things. One is that he said, I don't know any Lord for you other than myself. مَا عَلَمْتُ لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرِي. Another thing is, he said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I am your highest Lord. If I am not wrong, I think this was in two stages. At one stage, he was saying, I am your highest Lord. But he was not even happy to be the highest Lord. Then he went further and he said, I am the only one. So there is no limit for this ego. I wrote just few sentences and I just read them at the end. A few months ago, I wrote few sentences when someone asked me about ego. In Islamic culture, we don't have anything that can be taken as equivalent to ego quickly or easily. We have nafs, soul or self, and different stages of nafs, and different dimensions of nafs. In Hebrew, they say nafash. In Hebrew, I think. Yes. There is something very similar. I think they call nafash. Different dimensions of nafs, different faculties of nafs, etc. What word do we use for I-ness and self-centeredness and greediness and being arrogant and biased. This means, it's a word that they didn't use as, they call it ego, but this is, ego. Ego is our understanding of self when it becomes an end, a kind of lord that demands from all obedience and wants full satisfaction for itself. It seems that ego is not a philosophical entity which is created by God. I cannot point at something and say this is ego. Ego is a result of confusion and failing to distinguish between our divine self, which is facing God and yearning for God, and our lower and animal self, which in the absence of consciousness of God appear to us to be self-centered and autonomous and in conflict with others when they too operate like this, or appear to us to be like that. When there is another person with ego, this person who has ego with another person who has ego, they fight. Even if the other person has no ego, but you think that person has ego, again you fight. Therefore, no two egos can be at peace with each other. While millions of people without ego can die for each other, let alone to be at peace with each other. So this was very brief kind of reflection about ego from Islamic perspective. Thank you very much. Okay.
Can you repeat that last sentence, because I think that covers thousands who have no ego can die for each other.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I said no two egos can be at peace with each other, while millions of people without ego can die for each other, let alone to be at peace with each other.
That's this whole concept of losing yourself into the other.
Exactly.
Which is the same concept.
Where does that come from? That last bit, where does that come from?
It's my...
Your thoughts.
Yeah, this is what I have written. But it's reflection on the whole Islamic understanding. Yes.
He doesn't want to expresses that completely.